Metal scrapes stone. A torch sputters in the damp. Two boys hold their breath. London's tower is not just walls and ravens. It's a machine that decides who rules. Hours ago, they practiced archery in a fenced garden, laughing at a bent arrow. Tonight, their laughter feels dangerous, because innocence can look like a banner. When a crown wobbles, even children become pivots, and pivots attract blunt force. Chroniclers, writing for victors, loved shadows. Modern historians warn against them. Who stands outside that door? Protector, jailer, or a man told not to fail again? A single whispered order can change a dynasty faster than any battlefield. If bones under a staircase ever speak, will we stomach what they say aloud? The near consequence is brutal clarity. Power fears heirs it cannot fully control. That fear presses every footstep on these stairs, and it will not lift by dawn. Walk with me from this breathless door to the paperwork that made fear look tidy. We start before the whisper, at a deathbed, a marriage, and a kingdom unprepared. Bridge to next, the legacy of Edward IV, and how a vacuum drinks men dry. Begin with banners wilting after a long civil war, roses red and white sharing reign. Edward IV stitched victory from speed, charm, and a marriage that shocked courtiers. By taking Elizabeth Woodville, he traded neat alliances for a noisy, sprawling family. Her kin took offices, married well, and turned corridors into a Woodville neighborhood. Neville Power frayed, old magnates grumbled, yet Edward kept the throne by balancing knives. He built a court that looked stable from a distance and restless from the hearth. Accounts from the time are fragmentary and partisan, a caution we must carry forward. Then the king died, too soon. Breath left a body, and logic left the council. A child, Edward V, became the promise, the risk, and the argument in one frame. His brother, Richard of Shrewsbury, doubled the problem. Two heirs make plots reproduce. Without a clean regency plan, every adult learned a swift lesson. Children redraw loyalties. Is a boy a future partner or the fuse to your own sudden irrelevance? The immediate consequence was scrambling. Messages, arrests, and polite words that hid hard intent. Magnates calculated mothers, uncles, and guards. Favors were counted like coins in a purse. From that moment, the princes were no longer boys in a garden. They were corridors. Corridors demand escorts, and escorts become protective custody when fear wants a better name. Bridge to next, a journey to Stony Stratford, a meeting on the road, and a head on a block. April brings no truce. The king dies in spring, and custom steps in wearing armor. Counselors, juggling precedent and panic, invite Richard of Gloucester to act as protector. The choice seems sensible on paper. To Woodville eyes, it looks like a lock on doors. Elizabeth the Queen gathers kin, weighs a swift coronation to shrink a protector's window. Messages race north and south. Each letter is a bet on tomorrow's sheriff. Gloucester writes of loyalty. Rivers writes of duty. Both men read the same weather. When power calls a move custom, does it mean safety or leverage by another name? The immediate consequence is momentum. Escorts assemble, timetables harden, and the road matters more than court. A child king must sleep somewhere. Choosing where decides who has the keys by morning. Bridge to next, the ride to Stony Stratford. Greetings, wine, and a separation that redraws the board. Late April tightens like a tourniquet around the royal road to Stony Stratford. Rivers rides with the young king. Buckingham and Gloucester arrive with smiles and steel. Greetings turn to separate lodgings, then to knocks at dawn, then to arrests without fuss. Grey and Rivers are taken northward under guard. The boy continues south with friends. When an escort changes saddles at sunrise, is that protection or capture with better manners? The near consequence is momentum controlled by two dukes. Letters now travel in their wake. Elizabeth the Queen reads the wind, gathers children, and runs for sanctuary at Westminster. A mother chooses stone and altar over palace corridors because stone sometimes answers slower. London receives the king with pageants. He is lodged in the tower for his safety. A coronation date floats forward, then backward, then hesitates. Delays speak loud in minority reigns. Council sessions multiply. Courtiers count places at table. Rumors breed quicker than decisions. One neutral observation bears repeating. Contemporary accounts diverge on details, yet agree on tightening control. Gloucester is named Protector. The word calms parchment, yet sharpens the knives beneath it. Hastings, that veteran of power, arrives confident. Habit makes men misread new weather. June brings a morning council inside the tower. Friendly talk, then accusations, then a sudden order. Hastings' head falls within the hour on a log, without trial or scaffold sermon. The immediate consequence is shock. The deeper one is consent, because terror often drafts consensus. Magnates grasp that delay now equals danger. Few test the protector's appetite for interruption. Rivers and Grey remain prisoners, far from the boy they once guided toward a crown. The Queen's household and sanctuary shrinks in options. Allies count risk like beads between fingers. From street to chapel, meaning hardens. This reign will be ordered before it is celebrated. Brutal clarity has a bureaucracy. Clerks will soon reconcile fear with lineage and call it law. Bridge to next, the statute that redefines marriage, bastardy, and claim. The tidy ink of Titulus Regius. Parliament reaches for a gavel to quiet panic and instead invents a thunderclap. The measure is Titulus Regius, a statute that refiles bloodlines under a sharper light. It asserts Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville was void from the beginning. A prior contract, said to involve Eleanor Butler, renders the royal children legally illegitimate. If heirs are bastards in law, the crown cannot settle on a child's head. The argument fits the moment neatly, which is often how emergencies dress as principles. Bishops preach order, lawyers polish Latin, heralds redraw trees where branches now end early. Reports from the time disagree on details. Even supporters admit evidence surfaced conveniently. Does tidy ink make moral sense when the ink appears only after heads have rolled? The near consequence is immediate. The coronation is cancelled. The protector becomes the obvious adult. Richard takes the crown as Richard III, with Parliament's words as his scaffold. City pageants smile, merchants exhale, armies hold still because paperwork promises fewer surprises. Yet a statute cannot silence kitchens, chapels, and corridors where whispers test every premise. Some say the pre-contract claim is truth long buried. Others call it courtroom theater. One sober note belongs here. Contemporaries wrote for factions, and our sources are not neutral. Still, law changes what people are allowed to notice. Opposition now looks like sedition. Mothers calculate futures, uncles count titles. The princes fade behind curtains that admit fewer eyes. A law can stabilize a throne while deepening the hole where trust once lived. If stability requires erasing two children's claims, what happens to the children themselves tonight? The practical consequence arrives quietly. Fewer visits, stricter guards, and a schedule trimmed of witnesses. Rumor begins to work overtime, because rumor loves rooms that used to be busy. Bridge to next, step inside the tower's routines. Rooms, warders, last sightings, and the silence that thickened. Within the tower, routine pretends to be mercy, and mercy pretends to be routine. The boys' rooms look across inner courts. Small windows admit light, air, and careful visitors. Warders rotate. Attendants change. Confessor and physician visits become shorter, then rarer, then stories. Mancini reports fewer public appearances, fewer smiles, fewer hands waved through narrow grills. Croyland notes silences where announcements would usually stand. Absence becomes an official communication. Do children vanish when doors close, or when courtiers decide no one should ask anymore? The near consequence is surveillance without witnesses. Eyes are many, mouths are fewer, records are vague. Mealtimes compress, exercise shrinks to private rooms. Cards replace archery, corridors learn to swallow sound, gifts arrive less often, the woman who mends sleeves is reassigned, a new key clicks differently. One sober comment matters here. Contemporary testimonies diverge, and several are secondhand, decades later. Nonetheless, patterns are legible. Access narrows, schedules tighten, and visibility is rationed like salt. A boy king's calendar, once public theater, is now a ledger guarded by practical men. There are still prayers, tutors, and routine inspections, because bureaucracy loves its rituals in any weather. But each ritual now carries subtext. Someone is measuring risk, and the princes count as risk. Witnesses later recall glimpses at windows, shadows on stairs, and a rumor that beds were moved. Rumor thrives where confirmation is impossible. It eats uncertainty and breeds confident stories overnight. Even kindly acts read differently when futures are at stake. Milk can resemble poison to rivals. If protection requires secrecy, how do we tell the difference between safeguarding and erasing? The immediate effect is a vacuum. In vacuums, blame will settle on the heaviest name. That name is the king now crowned, whose responsibility expands with every guard he does not replace. Modern historians caution against certainty, yet acknowledge the logic of concentrated power and narrow corridors. Bridge to next. Weigh Richard III, motive, opportunity, and the men who could act for him. Start with motive, because motive walks into every meeting before the minutes are written. Richard III needs stability. Rival claims fracture stability. Two royal boys embody rival claims. Opportunity exists by geography. The princes live inside his fortress, under officers sworn to him. Means require loyal hands. Brackenbury commands the tower. Trusted servants travel on short notice at night. Later narratives name Tyrell, Dighton, and Forrest, smothering in bedclothes, quiet, tidy, and hard to verify. Thomas More writes decades later. Parts read like informed rumor, parts like courtroom drama in prose. A confessed order under Henry Tudor appears convenient. Victors often curate the sins of predecessors. One cautious note: administrative records, progresses, and audiences place Richard visibly across several pressured weeks. Could a king delegate a single, sealed instruction and keep his schedule clean and reassuring? The near consequence of suspicion is corrosive. Every dismissal, pardon, or grant looks prophylactic, not generous. Merchants and aldermen prefer calm. Calm now depends on no boy stepping onto a balcony. If silence continues, blame coagulates around the throne, whether or not parchment bears a signature. Modern scholarship diverges. Some see probability pointing at Richard, others demand documentary proof, not logic. Yet politics rarely gifts smoking guns, it gifts shaped memories and incentives to forget inconvenient nights. Would a prudent ruler remove them, or prefer living hostages whose existence chills every rival? Prudence cuts both ways. Dead heirs create martyrs, living heirs create magnets for rebellions. Either choice risks the realm, either choice stains legitimacy, either choice tempts desperate intermediaries. Here at 2024 archival note surfaces, a Tyrrell family chain of custody that renews old debates. It hints at reach and loyalty networks, not definitive guilt. Still, networks enable unrecorded orders. If Richard needed nothing written, did someone decide initiative looked like loyalty with faster results? The immediate effect of that possibility is darker. Agency disperses, while responsibility still points upward. Bridge to next. Turn the lens on Henry Tudor. Benefits, timing, and how winners rewrite what they inherit. Begin with a boat leaving Brittany, an exile rehearsing speeches for a crown not yet his. Henry Tudor's path to power depends on collapsing Yorkist certainty and stitching a new story fast. Before Bosworth, he needs the boys alive as symbols against Richard. After victory, their status complicates legitimacy. If they live, they can unmake his marriage plan. If they're gone, they can condemn his rival. Which uncertainty serves him better? Provable survival, or a silence that can be narrated with benefit? The near consequence of that calculus is messaging. Proclamations target traitors, not the princes by name. He marries Elizabeth of York, aligning red and white roses and cooling knives in noble halls. He orders Titulus Regius repealed and copies destroyed, a legal broom sweeping away an awkward scaffold. Prudence or convenience? Does erasing a statute clarify justice, or tidy history to suit the living? A balanced note: our sources are partisan. Several key acts are known, but motives remain inferred. Early months of the new reign fill with grants, oaths, and the hard work of paying armies. Clerks copy reconciliations, sheriffs receive new warrants, preachers remake Richard into a cautionary example. If the boys died earlier, Henry inherits their absence and the propaganda that absence allows. If they somehow lived, every week of Henry's rule would demand secret prisons or sudden ships. Either path carries risk. Either path offers a narrative that points guilt anywhere but forward. Merchants and diplomats prefer closure. Closure arrives when a winner rewrites both law and rumor. Does a king who benefits from mystery dare to solve it if the answer can wound him? The immediate effect of not solving it is strategic fog. Fog makes rival beacons harder to follow. Yet fog also feeds pretenders. Within 2 years, voices claim a lost prince's return from abroad. Henry's government thus fights on two fronts: governing today and editing yesterday to keep tomorrow quiet. Modern historians disagree on agency, but concur on incentives. Uncertainty served Tudor consolidation surprisingly well. Bridge to next: the man who pivoted fastest. Buckingham, whose ambition and timing made him suspect and casualty. Scan the map in autumn 1483. Rivers swelling, roads mud deep, and one duke changing sides. Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, begins as Richard's ally. Processions, councils, and a share in sudden arrests. Then he revolts. Motives are debated. Bloodline pride, policy discussed, or a wager that misread the weather. He claims descent from Edward III. Lineage feeds appetite when thrones look temporarily ownerless. While Richard rides a royal progress, Buckingham's window opens, access, contacts, and knowledge of Tower routines. Could a powerful intermediary have acted first, expecting gratitude from whichever adult later wore the crown? The near consequence of that thought is a narrower suspect list with a wider range of motives. Continental chronicles and later traditions at the College of Arms point a finger in his direction. The evidentiary floor is uneven. We have hints, not receipts. Suggestive, but shy of courtroom weight. Buckingham's rebellion collapses. He is captured and executed swiftly, taking many secrets to a November grave. Dead men tidy timelines. They also remove the one witness who might have traded confession for mercy. If initiative masqueraded as loyalty, who would write it down and why would survivors preserve it? A concise editorial note. Attribution often follows politics. Sources close to Richmond tend to prefer Buckingham a villain. Yet even critics concede he had means. Men, movement, and a narrow corridor while the king traveled. Opportunity does not equal guilt, but it makes long nights in the Tower easier to imagine. Would Richard punish an unsanctioned act or absorb it as a fait accompli that simplified his reign? Either answer stains trust. Either answer invites rebels to gamble that zeal will look like service. The immediate result of Buckingham's fall is consolidation for Richard, but also a narrative rod for enemies. Later propagandists can choose their devil. Tyrant king or treacherous duke, both sell in crowded marketplaces. For our purposes, the absence is louder than the accusation. Command chains remain inferential at best. Bridge to next. Step from suspects to instruments. Warders, envoys, and night messengers who could make orders vanish. Start with a key ring and a ledger. The constable of the Tower owns both every night. Sir Robert Brackenbury controls gates, guards, and the rhythm by which corridors inhale and exhale. Orders to him can be oral, sealed, or implied by changes to the duty roster. Written commands carry risk. Oral commands dissolve into air after the purpose is complete. Later narratives highlight trusted agents. Tyrrell, Dighton, Forrest, men of access, discretion, and adaptable loyalty. Smothering appears in several accounts because it is quiet, quick, and leaves little spectacle behind. Steel sings, cloth does not. Silence benefits anyone who wants events without theater or witnesses. A practical detail matters. Beds, bolsters, and door bolts are mundane tools in crisis politics. Scheduling also matters. A switch of warders at midnight creates gaps nobody records with care. Could a narrow circle stage a final visit, finish an order, and leave no clerk awake? The near consequence of such design is containment. Fewer participants, fewer leaks, and memories that blur conveniently. Bodies complicate things. Hiding them requires place, time, and confidence in tomorrow's renovations or rubble. One hypothesis points downstairs, rubble voids under steps. Others imagine river runs or chapel corners. These options share a principle. Keep disposal close, short, and aligned with routine movements. A concise editorial note. Our strongest descriptions surface decades later, colored by Tudor politics and moral theater. Even so, logistics within the Tower make an unrecorded act plausible without inventing miracles or ghosts. A constable can be bypassed by higher rank or used as a shield after the fact. He might receive nothing explicit, just a midnight visitor whose presence implies a permission nobody will contest. Would a loyal officer ask for parchment when the knock itself arrives with royal gravity? If initiative belonged to subordinates, responsibility still shadows the sovereign who created the corridor and the silence. The immediate effect is a narrowed evidentiary trail. Historians must reconstruct from schedules, not signatures or blades. Bridge to next. When certainty dries up, hope floods in. Pretenders, survival tales, and the political uses of miracles. After voids come voices. Europe begins to hear that a prince survived absences and stares. Civil wars breed doubles. Losers export claimants along with merchants, monks, and exiled captains of ships. Lambert Simnel surfaces first, molded by adults who need a Yorkist banner with fresh stitching. He is crowned in Dublin, carried to Stoke Field, and captured, then spared as a kitchen curiosity. Perkin Warbeck arrives later with better tutors, languages, and patrons fond of useful complications. He claims to be Richard of Shrewsbury. Letters from Maximilian and others entertain the possibility at length. Descriptions mention a birthmark, courtly manners, and knowledge that seems privileged yet possibly coached. Does mastery of etiquette prove identity, or simply prove access to people who miss a prince? The near consequence is clear. Henry VII must govern while playing whack-a-myth across coasts and courts. Diplomacy tightens, ports watch new faces, proclamations distinguish pity for a tool from wrath at handlers. Interrogations produce confessions, confessions produce pamphlets, pamphlets produce certainty convenient to the printing sponsor. A measured editorial point. Warbeck's testimony shifts under pressure, fragments sound rehearsed, others oddly particular. Skeptics call him a project of Burgundy. Sympathizers hear echoes that embarrass both Tudor and York. If a real prince lived, he would require protection, movement, and money without leaks for years. Networks can do many things. They rarely keep miracles oxygenated without letters, bribes, or credible sightings. Warbeck dies in 1499. His end tidies the ledger after an expensive chapter of maybes. Simnel fades into harmlessness, a useful parable for how myths age into anecdotes with wages. Yet the pretenders prove something enduring. Uncertainty has a payroll, and nostalgia funds it generously. Would a living prince have failed to trigger a larger European coalition than pamphlets and harbor whispers? The immediate outcome of these claims is more archival smoke. The fire remains earlier if it existed. Bridge to next, leave rumor and meet rubble. Two small skeletons, a staircase, and a decision made in 1674. The year is 1674, and masons pry at a worn staircase in the tower. Timbers come loose, rubble spills. A void opens beneath steps that kept boots moving. Inside, men find bones, small, jumbled, and wrapped in the dust of other centuries. Work halts, foremen whisper, someone fetches an official with better clothes and steadier hands. London, rebuilt after fire, understands discoveries that demand ceremony as much as carpentry. Were these the lost princes, or merely children folded into a fortress's long, indifferent memory? The near consequence is momentum toward meaning. Absence finally has a place, if not a date. Reports travel upward. Courtiers measure implications. A narrative congeals faster than ledgers can catch up. Bones become symbols. Symbols demand dignity. Dignified symbols gravitate toward altars and marble inscriptions. Within a few years, an urn receives the remains in Westminster, a national hush attached. Placement in the abbey consecrates a hypothesis. Visitors will meet a story before they meet evidence. A tempered observation belongs here. The chain of custody is partial, and excavation notes are scant. What seems tidy to posterity felt improvised that week. Workmen, rubble, officials, and a hurried conclusion. The tower keeps many bodies' secrets. Architecture can shelter truth and temptation in the same cavity. Still, the find changes atmospherics. Now, skeptics must argue against bones, not merely against rumor. Ceremony fixes memory. Once sealed in royal surroundings, remains acquire gravity that resists revision. If reverence locks a lid, can inquiry still breathe without sounding impious or sensational? The immediate effect is a durable presumption. Textbooks, guides, and sermons orbit the urn like planets. Yet presumption is not proof. Even marble admits uncertainty if you read past the capital letters. Bridge to next. Open the urn in 1933, when science and sentiment briefly shared a table and notebook. Summer 1933 grants an exception. The Abbey authorizes examination of the urn and its contents. Lawrence Tanner and William Wright lift bones into trays, labeling fragments with careful era-specific methods. Skulls, mandibles, and long bones suggest 2 children. Dentition places ages roughly 12 and about 10. Growth plates speak in half sentences. Sutures complicate certainty. Sex determination remains outside the period's reliable toolkit. Mixed in are stray elements, animal bones and extra fragments, echoes of earlier disturbance or careless reburial. Does a jumble weaken identification, or simply mirror how 17th century workers salvaged under time pressure? The near consequence is provisional confidence. Ages align with princes. Circumstances align with long-held suspicions. Yet conclusions are modest. The team stops short of certainty and wisely frames possibilities as tentative. One sober comment deserves emphasis. Protocols then lack today's contamination controls and statistical frameworks. Photographs and notes survive, but several contextual clues, original positioning, stratigraphy, were lost 2 centuries earlier. Critics later fault circularity. Supporters answer that best available methods still pointed in the same direction. Either way, the examination codifies ambiguity. The urn returns to its niche with thicker footnotes. Science, having looked in, cannot sign its name in ink darker than the evidence allows. If identities hinge on DNA, will ethics and gatekeepers permit needles to touch royal dust? Modern techniques could test mitochondrial lines, isotopes, and microscopic wear with minimal sampling and high yield. But authorization is politics, investments. Consent blends tradition, public feeling, and risk of unintended outcomes. The immediate effect of 1933 is a paradox: more data, sharper questions, and enduring restraint. Certainty inches closer, yet stays behind glass. Every tour guide learns to pronounce inconclusive with care. Bridge to next. Consider contemporary genetics and precedent. What could be done, and who must say yes first? Start with a toolbox rather than a shovel. Mitochondrial lines, Y markers, and autosomal comparisons. Minimal sampling can live inside a pinhead, petrous bone powder, tooth cementum, or microcore enamel. Screening precedes cutting. Collagen fingerprinting can flag human remains before precious DNA is touched. Then, radiocarbon dates, Bayesian modeling, and isotope profiles sketch diet, birthplace, and childhood water. Precedent calms nerves. Richard III's remains were identified through mtDNA, genealogy, and converging context. Another lesson arrives from Imperial Russia. Family identifications can survive politics when statistics carry weight. Even so, sanctuaries are not laboratories. Permission is a gate as real as any door. In Westminster Abbey, authority layers: dean and chapter, the crown, and church guardians of the site. Will they risk a sliver of bone if the answer could reorder centuries of storytelling? The near consequence of approval is clarity with footnotes. The near consequence of refusal is curated uncertainty. Either path has costs. Precedent invites further tests. Restraint invites further myth with official blessing. Chain of custody must be reestablished with modern rigor: sealed rooms, logged handlers, and independent replication. Comparators matter. Maternal lines may still be traceable, while paternal markers face plantings of uncertainty. Contamination is not a scandal if anticipated. It is a protocol problem solved by design. Suppose results split the world. Not the princes, move suspicion to the staircase and the urn. Suppose results confirm identities. Blame will then migrate, by probability, toward those who controlled the corridors. Would science end the argument, or simply shift it from who to who, ordered, and when? Public history changes slower than lab summaries. Museums rewrite labels, but theater keeps selling familiar faces. That inertia is not wholly cynical. Narratives carry meaning that data cannot easily replace overnight. The immediate effect of any test, therefore, is double: better facts and a louder fight over their meaning. Consensus, if it comes, will need numbers, context, and storytellers willing to retire beloved conjectures. Bridge to next. Meet the storytellers who shaped the villain and the echo. Thomas More and Shakespeare. Begin with a quill that writes for order as much as for truth and theater. Thomas More sketches a tale of beds, cushions, and hired hands with grim competence. His proximity to power lends texture. His chronology mixes deposition, rumor with moral architecture. He frames Richard as a study in calculation, crafting vice that reads like policy notes. Decades later, Shakespeare takes that scaffold and builds a stage that crackles with wicked charisma. Audiences meet a crooked back, a nimble tongue, and murders marching to drum-perfect cadences. Literature carries faster than depositions. Profile becomes panorama. Dissenting footnotes turn politely into background murmurs. One quiet aside is necessary. Sources are fragmentary, motives layered, and narrative rewards neat villains unfairly. Do we prefer probability shaded by context, or a character whose motives fit nightly performance? Printers, patrons, and politics reward clarity. Ambiguity sells poorly unless a body walks the boards. The near consequence is a public memory where Richard's agency feels obvious, even when paperwork is not. Classrooms inherit capes and shadows. Museums then spend decades translating theater back into conditional statements. More is not pure propaganda. Shakespeare is not a courtroom, yet both shape the evidentiary appetite. They teach us to expect confessions, monologues, and a letter that names a knight and dagger. Historians counter with ledgers, progresses, and gaps, material stubbornly dull compared with soliloquies and sudden drums. Some revisionists overcorrect, sanding villainy smooth. Others rehearse old charges with new adverbs and footnotes. Either extreme misses texture, power compresses choice, and compressed choices rarely leave elegant paper trails. If art built the villain, it also preserved questions that archivists might otherwise have ignored entirely. The immediate effect is methodological humility. Quote the plays, but anchor claims in survivals, not speeches. Bridge to next. List the survivals we still seek and map a research path mere drama cannot supply. Start with ledgers and logs, the paperwork of kitchens, stables, and chamberlains that outlive banners. Household books can timestamp candles, beds, and midnight meals that suddenly did not happen. Wardrobe and exchequer rolls might reveal purchases for burials, repairs, or unusual linen requisitions. City chroniclers, sheriff's files, and guild records sometimes capture whispers that palaces prefer forgetting. Private letters hide in manor chests. Marginalia in service books can pin dates with ink. Archivists know the drill. Catalog, digitize, and cross-check names that change spelling every other page. Archaeology adds tools, non-invasive scans beneath chapels, micro-CT on remains, and residue testing of mortars. Material culture matters. Nails, wood grains, and lime layers can date voids under ancient staircases. Radiography can re-examine the urn without breaching seals. Imaging resolves packing methods and bone selection. Isotopes trace where children drank water. Diets draw maps. Enamel archives travel better than parchment. Forensics meets history in laboratories that respect sanctity while pursuing well-defined, minimal sampling strategies. One practical aside. Chain of custody must be absolute, with blinded labs and pre-registered analytical plans. Could a coordinated project unite abbey authorities, royal households, and universities under transparent governance? The near consequence would be trust. Whatever answer emerges, process would resist both zeal and denial. Digital humanities can knit fragments, network graphs of correspondence, timelines that flag improbable overlaps, audit trails. Crowdsourcing helps, but curation rules. Every upload needs provenance, not only passion and creative hypotheses. Funding shapes speed. Independence shapes credibility. Both must be insulated from factions that want verdicts early. If nothing decisive surfaces, even that matters. Negative evidence redraws where we stop digging and why. Suppose, however, that a ledger surfaces naming a payment, a knight, and a keeper. Even then, interpretation requires context. A word like comfort can mean mercy, rations, or murder. The immediate outcome of this roadmap is disciplined patience. Answers are boundaries, not slogans or convenient villains. Bridge to next. Weigh the two final scenarios and their costs, then close with the choice that still waits. Stand at the urn and choose. Either answer shakes shelves that felt immovable yesterday. If the remains are not the prince's, curriculum and tour scripts pivot before the next term. If they are, responsibility gravitates toward those who control doors, diaries, and midnight corridors. Would confirmation quiet blame, or simply push it up the chain until politics balks? The near consequence in both paths is public reckoning. Labels rewritten, statues recontextualized, and arguments sobered. Institutions must then decide whether reverence means silence, or whether truth is a modern form of care. This is not a plea for spectacle. It is a plea for transparent process with boundaries. Minimal sampling can spare dignity, while ending centuries of curated uncertainty and industrious rumor. Refusal also speaks. It tells classrooms that story outranks test and memory outranks method. At some point, a society decides whether it trusts procedures enough to learn uncomfortable things. The tower teaches a hard lesson. Power fears heirs, science fears locked doors, and both fear haste. If we open those doors, we inherit answers and their costs. If not, we inherit ghosts. The choice lingers with you. Which form of courage should guard the urn in our century? Bridge to next. The ethics of royal excavation. Consent, minimal harm, and who holds the final yes.